Montana Territory, August 1874. The stagecoach wheels ground to a halt outside the dusty station house in Bluebank, its final breath a cloud of grit settling over the wooden porch. The door creaked open, and a young woman in a cream traveling dress stepped down into the sun. Her gloved hand trembled slightly as it reached for balance. She was not what the town expected. Olive Ellery stood tall, her dark auburn hair pinned beneath her bonnet, eyes sharp with the kind of strength born from surviving things that tried to break her. 23 and alone, but not fragile. She clutched a carpetbag like it held every inch of her future. A man leaned against a post nearby, arms crossed, boots planted steady in the earth. His hat shaded his face, but the years laid bare in his posture. He looked like the land weathered, quiet, and honest. His name was Heath Harlan, and he did not believe in second chances. Not until that moment. He stepped forward without hesitation. "You Olive Ellery?" he asked, voice low and rough like gravel in a dry creek. She nodded once, lifting her chin. "You must be Heath Harlan." He offered his hand. "That I am. I'll take you home." She stared at it for a heartbeat, then placed hers in his. His grip was steady, warm. She didn't pull away. He led her toward his wagon, and she followed without a word. They rode in silence for a while, the land stretching wide around them. The August sky burned overhead, but the air between them stayed still like something waiting to take shape. "You ever been west of Kansas City?" he asked finally. "No," she said. "I've never seen this much open sky." He glanced at her from beneath the brim of his hat. "Takes some getting used to." "I want to," she said. "Get used to it, I mean." He nodded. He liked her voice, not soft, but clear. No trembling. The Harlan Ranch sat 30 miles outside town, tucked beneath a ridge of pine-covered hills. It was not much, just a house with a wraparound porch, a barn, 2 pens, and a windmill always spinning, but it was solid. It was earned. Heath helped her down from the wagon and stood back as she took in the place. "It's quiet," she said. He nodded. "You'll have your own room until we figure things out." "I came here to be your wife," she said, meeting his eyes. "We do not have to pretend otherwise." He looked at her, then really looked. She was not what he expected either. He cleared his throat. "That may be, but I aim to give you a choice." She gave him a small, tired smile. "Thank you." Inside, the house was clean but plain. She ran her fingers over the windowsill, the table, the back of a chair. "Did you build this?" He nodded once. "After my wife died." Olive turned. "How long ago?" 3 years. She didn't say she was sorry. He did not seem to want that. She looked at the wall. One photograph hung there, a young woman with gentle eyes and 2 children beside her. A boy and a girl. "They yours?" He nodded again. "Tobias is 10. Tessa's 8. Where are they?" He hesitated. "My sister in Helena's had them a while. I sent them after the sickness. I was not fit to raise anyone." Olive's voice softened. "Are they coming back soon?" "I want them to," he said. "If you still want this life, they'll come home." "I do," she said, and she meant it. "You should write them." He looked at her then like he was seeing something he thought he had lost. That evening, she helped him bring in the horses from pasture. She did not complain about the dust or the weight of the pail. She asked about the animals, the land, how long the winters lasted. "You learn quick," he said. "I had to," she replied. "My father died when I was 16. I kept my mother's store open until she passed last year." He watched her tie the gate shut. "Why come here?" She looked up at him, the last of the sunlight catching her face. "Because I was tired of surviving alone." He felt that like a blow to the chest. That night, she stood on the porch after dinner, arms folded, eyes on the stars. He stepped out beside her, kept a respectful distance. "It's quiet here," she said. "It is. I like it." He looked at her. "You sure you want this?" "I am not a man with much to give." She turned to him, her voice steady. "You offered me a hand today. No one's done that in a long time. That means more than you think." His throat tightened. "You want to make it work?" "I do." He nodded. "Then we will." The next morning, Heath hitched the wagon and they rode into town. He stood beside her in front of the preacher. No guests, no frills. Just two people who had seen enough of loss to know the value of a promise. When he placed the ring on her finger, his hand shook. When she said, "I do," her voice did not. They returned home as husband and wife. That night, Heath sat beside the fire in the parlor while Olive unpacked her few things in the room next to his. He watched the flames and thought of how her hand had felt in his small but certain. She came out wearing a simple blue nightdress, her face bare, hair loose over her shoulders. She stood in the doorway, unsure. "I do not expect anything tonight," he said quietly. She crossed the room and sat beside him. "I know." They sat in silence, the fire crackling low. Then she reached out, took his hand in hers. "I am not afraid of you," she said. He turned to her. "You should not be." She smiled. "I am not." They sat like that a long time, just holding hands. It was not passion that moved between them, it was something older, deeper. Like trust beginning to rise out of the ashes. Heath did not know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in years, he was not afraid of it. He had taken her hand, and she had not let go. The wind shifted 2 days after the wedding, cooler and edged with pine. Summer had begun its slow crawl toward September, and the light fell at a slant across the ridge, turning the wheatgrass pale gold. Heath rose at dawn, as he always did, and found Olive already outside, hanging linens on the line, sleeves rolled past her elbows. "You didn't have to start so early," he said, stepping onto the porch with his coffee. She turned, hands still at the clothespin. "The light's good. And it's quiet." He watched her tuck a strand of hair behind her ear, her eyes on the trees just beyond the fence. The sky was still pale, not yet blue, and she looked like she belonged to the hush of it. "I'll be moving cattle from the south pasture today," he said. "Likely gone till sundown." She nodded. "What should I handle here?" "You've already done more than I expected." "I like knowing what needs doing," she said. "Idle hands never sat well with me." He stepped down, boots crunching against the dry grass, and walked with her partway to the barn. "If you're comfortable, there's a stack of ledgers in my office. From the feed orders and the last drive. They need sorting." She hesitated. "You trust me with that?" He didn't smile, but there was something easy in his voice. "You married me, didn't you?" She glanced at his face, then gave a small nod. "All right then." He rode out soon after, and she stood at the edge of the porch, watching until the shape of him blurred into the trees. Then she went inside and found the ledgers stacked beneath a tin box of receipts, ink well half full beside them. The room didn't bear much decoration. A rifle leaned against the corner, and a worn Bible sat on the sill, pages thinned from use. She set to work without looking back. By midday, the sun had settled heavy on the roof, and the paper curled under her hand. She stopped only to drink from the well bucket and walk the perimeter fence, making note of 2 loose boards by the east gate. A coyote had passed through in the night. She saw the print in the soft dirt and the remains of a chicken too far from the coop. When Heath returned, his shirt was damp at the collar and his horse flecked with sweat. He dismounted slow, back stiff from the saddle. "There's something I need to show you," she said. "By the coop." He followed her around the side of the barn, listening as she pointed out the tracks and the broken wire. "I'll fix the gate," he said. "You see any sign of more?" "Not since this morning." He crouched near the fence, brushing the dirt with his fingers. "You've got a sharp eye." "I was raised around livestock," she said. "Not cattle, but enough to know what doesn't belong." He stood, brushing his palms on his trousers. "I'm glad for it." She looked at him, then turned toward the house. "You should eat. I left a plate warming by the stove." Inside, he found the cornbread still soft, beans thick with salt pork. He sat at the table while she refilled the water pail. "Ledger sorted," she said, not looking at him. "You were overcharged by $6 on the last grain shipment." He set down his fork. "You sure?" She met his eyes. "I checked twice." He let out a breath, not quite a laugh. "I've never caught it myself." "I'd be surprised if you had time to," she said. "You're running this place near alone." He leaned back, studying her. "I've managed. I can help. I want to." He held her gaze, then nodded once. "All right." The lamp flickered low that night as they sat in the parlor, him near the fire again, her with mending on her lap. The silence between them had changed. Not heavy now, but steady, like a river running beneath snow. I wrote to Helena today, he said at last. Asked her to bring the children home before the frost. She didn't look up. Do you think they'll remember you? His voice was quiet. I hope they will. She paused, then set her stitching aside. What were they like before? He hesitated. Tessa followed her mother everywhere. Tobias wanted to be older than he was. He used to shadow me in the barn, asking questions I didn't always have answers for. I can imagine him still doing that, she said. He watched the fire. They were good children. I don't know what they'll be now. She leaned forward slightly. Whatever they are, they'll need something steady when they return. We both will. He looked at her, and the space between them felt less like distance and more like something waiting to be crossed. I never expected this, he said. She didn't look away. Neither did I. The fire cracked. Outside, a night bird called once, then fell quiet. He stood and crossed the room. May I walk you to your room? She rose, her hand brushing his sleeve. Yes. At the doorway, she turned to him. I'd like to help prepare the children's rooms, if that's all right. His voice was low. It is. She hesitated, then touched his hand lightly. Good night, Heath. Good night, Olive. He watched her close the door behind her. Something unspoken hung in the hall, not rushed, not fragile. Just real. And for the first time in years, he found himself hoping. The letter arrived 5 days later, folded twice and sealed with wax the color of dried berries. Heath found it in the postmaster's box when he rode in to collect supplies. He didn't open it until he was back on the wagon seat, reins slack in his hand, the wind stirring the paper against his thumb. He read it once, then again slower. They're coming, he said when he reached the house, stepping into the kitchen where Olive was kneading dough. She wiped her hands on her apron. How soon? Next week. My sister says they're well enough to travel. Olive nodded once, then turned toward the pantry. We'll need to air the linens. I believe the mattresses will hold, but I'll check for moths. He watched her move with a quiet resolve, sleeves dusted with flour, braid tucked beneath a kerchief. You're not nervous? She paused, hand on the pantry door. I'd be a fool not to be. I mean about them. About what they might. I don't expect them to like me, she said, turning back. They don't know me, but I'll give them reason to trust me with time. He nodded, unsure what could be said beyond that. She returned to the dough, pressing her weight into it, arms firm with purpose. They spent the next days in steady preparation. Olive scrubbed the floorboards in the children's rooms, humming low under her breath while Heath repaired a hinge on the closet door. She stitched a patch onto a worn quilt she found in the cedar chest and laid it carefully across the smaller bed. Heath fetched new boots from town, guessing the sizes by memory and hoping he hadn't been gone too long to still know them right. Olive didn't ask about their mother, not even once, and he was grateful for it. The past stayed where it belonged, quiet and unspoken. One evening, Olive stood on a stool, reaching for something high on the kitchen shelf. Heath stepped in just as she lost her balance, the jar tipping from her hands. He caught it, one arm steadying her waist. Careful, he said. She looked down at him, still in his hold. Wasn't planning on falling. He set the jar aside, but didn't move his hand. I wouldn't have let you. The air between them shifted, not with surprise, but with recognition. She stepped down, slow, and stood close. When they come, she said, will you want me to stay quiet, let you lead? I want you to be yourself, he said. They'll need that more than anything. She nodded. Then I will. The children arrived on a Tuesday, near dusk. A freight wagon brought them the last stretch from the depot, a young teamster at the reins and a bundle of trunks lashed behind. Tobias climbed down first, lanky and solemn, his hat too big for his head. Tessa followed, clutching a cloth doll and blinking into the sunset. Heath stepped forward, heart caught somewhere between pride and dread. Tobias. Tessa. Tobias stood stiff. Sir. Tessa looked up. Papa. He crouched and opened his arms. She flew into them without hesitation, and he held her close, eyes shut tight. Tobias stayed back, arms crossed. Olive remained on the porch, hands folded, waiting. Heath rose. This is Olive. She's my wife now. Tessa turned. You got married? I did. The girl studied Olive with open curiosity. Do you cook? Yes, Olive said. I also sew, read aloud, and know how to braid hair without pulling. Tessa looked at her father. Can she stay? Heath gave a slow nod. Yes, she's staying. They ate supper around the table that night, the children subdued but watching everything. Tobias didn't speak much, but when Olive passed him the butter, he muttered a quiet, "Thank you." Later, after they'd gone to bed, Heath and Olive stood in the hallway outside their rooms. A lantern flickered low between them. You did well with them, Heath said. It wasn't hard, she replied. They just needed someone to see them. He tilted his head. And you see them? I try. He stepped closer. I see you too. She looked up, I steady. Then maybe we'll all be all right. He reached for her hand, fingers rough but sure. She didn't flinch. We will be, he said. No fire burned between them that night, only the quiet promise of something truer. Not built in a moment, but across days like these. And for the first time, the house felt whole again. The first frost came in thin lace along the fence rails, drawing pale veins over the troughs and water pails. The mornings turned sharp, air clinging to breath, and the scent of smoke lingered longer each evening. Inside the Harlan house, Olive stitched heavier linings into the children's coats while Tessa leaned against her side, humming without words. Heath had taken Tobias into the north field just after sunrise. The boy's shoulders had grown straighter in the past week, his silence no longer wary but thoughtful. He asked questions now about hooves and wire tension, about the slope of the land before snowfall. Heath answered each without hurry, letting the boy set his own pace. You ever miss Helena? Heath asked, adjusting the cinch on the mule harness. Tobias looked toward the pine stand. Aunt Ruth was kind, but she didn't know how to talk without filling the whole room. Heath gave a short exhale, close to a laugh. Olive's not like that. No, the boy agreed. She listens first. They hauled the last of the hay bales to the upper loft before dusk, Tobias climbing the ladder with care and handing each down. When they returned, Olive had set stew on the stove and the table was already laid. Tessa had drawn a picture in charcoal and left it folded on Heath's plate. I can see the cows got horns this time, he said, holding the paper up. Tessa grinned. Olive said it wasn't fair to always draw them as gentle. After supper, Tobias lingered beside the hearth while Olive rinsed the bowls. His voice came low from behind her. Did you have brothers? She turned, drying her hands. No, just a younger sister. She died of fever when we were girls. He nodded once, not pressing. You act like someone who had to do things alone. I did, she said. But I don't want it anymore. He looked toward the parlor where Heath had begun tuning the banjo he hadn't touched in years. You make it easy to be around. She stepped closer, setting a hand lightly on his shoulder. So do you. That night, after the children had gone to bed, Heath carried a log in from the stack and crouched by the fire. Olive was seated in the rocker, her shawl drawn close. You used to play, she said, nodding at the banjo. He set the log in place. Only when the house felt full enough to hold the sound. She folded her hands in her lap. It does now. He sat across from her, leaning forward. Tobias told me something today. Said you listen first. She tilted her head. I find people tell you more if you wait. I'd like to know more about you, he said, voice low. Not in pieces. Whole. Her gaze didn't falter. You'll have to ask better questions. He smiled then, slow and honest. Did you ever think about marrying before? I had a suitor once. A teacher. Very polite. But he was in love with what I represented, not who I was. And who are you? Her voice was quiet. Someone who doesn't want to be admired. Just seen. And kept? He reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers. I reckon I can do that. She didn't pull away. You already are. The wind picked up outside, rattling the eaves, and the fire leaned toward its own reflection in the window glass. They sat like that, hands resting together, not needing to say more. Later, as they reached the threshold of their bedrooms, Heath paused. I don't want to sleep in separate rooms anymore, he said. Not unless you ask it. She looked at him a long moment. Then she opened her door wider. Behind them, the house held its breath and exhaled. The snow came early that year, soft and steady, blanketing the high plains in silence. The pines grew heavy with it, branches bowed like prayer. Heath had taken the buckboard into Bluebank 2 days before the storm began, and now the road back was buried under white. He arrived late, boots soaked through, cheeks raw with wind. Olive was waiting at the door with a lamp in her hand. She didn't speak as he stepped inside. She simply reached for his coat, peeled it from his shoulders, and hung it by the stove. He stood still for a moment, steam rising off him. "Roads are gone," he said, voice rough. "Took the long route by the riverbank." She poured him broth without asking. "You're not to go again until it clears." He took the bowl and nodded once. "I won't." In the sitting room, Tobias was carving a small block of cedar. Tessa sat cross-legged nearby, humming to herself as she combed her doll's hair with a pine needle. The fire glowed low and even. Olive watched them a moment, then turned back to Heath. "Did you find what you went for?" He pulled a small wrapped bundle from his coat pocket. "Mail? And the carpenter's list. He'll bring lumber when the trail thaws." She opened the bundle and unfolded the letter inside. Her handwriting was on it, addressed to a widow in Kansas she'd once shared a boarding room with. She read it silently, then tucked it into the drawer near the stove. "You're building something new?" she asked, gesturing toward the list. "Smokehouse. And a lean-to for the lambs come spring." She touched the edge of the paper. "I'd like to help with the design. If that's all right?" He looked at her, eyes steady. "It is. I'd be glad for that." That night, after the children were asleep and the wind had settled to a hush, Olive brought out a small tin box she hadn't opened since arriving. She set it between them on the parlor table, then lifted the lid. Inside were 4 photographs, faded with time, and a folded square of linen embroidered with a girl's name. "My sister's things," she said. He didn't speak, just waited. "She died in the spring. I was 16. We buried her in the orchard behind the store. My mother asked me to keep her memory living, but I didn't know how." He reached across the table, touched the edge of the cloth. "You carried her with you anyway." She nodded. "I think that's what love does. It stays even when the shape of it changes." He hesitated, then reached into the inside pocket of his vest. From it, he pulled a small locket on a leather cord. "My wife gave me this before she passed. I never knew what to do with it. Couldn't wear it. Couldn't bury it." She opened it gently. Inside was a pressed sprig of sage and a tiny sketch of 2 children. Olive looked at him. "You've done right by her." He met her eyes. "I want to do right by you too." She closed the locket and set it on the table between them. "Then let's stop carrying them separately. Let's build something new with them beside us." He moved to her then, not in haste, but with the certainty of a man who'd waited long enough to know truth when he saw it. His hand found hers and she leaned into him, their foreheads touching. In the weeks that followed, the snow held, and with it came a rhythm to the days. Olive began teaching Tessa to read by lamplight, tracing letters into the hearth dust. Tobias watched once, then began asking questions about long division. Heath built a sled from scrap wood, and the children took to it like they'd never left the land. One morning, as the sky brightened with the promise of thaw, Olive stood beside Heath in the barn, hands wrapped around a tin mug. The lambs were due soon, and the new lean-to stood finished behind them. "I never thought to find peace in a place this far from where I began," she said. He turned toward her. "I never thought I'd feel whole again." She reached up, brushed a flake of hay from his shoulder. "You are." They married again that spring. This time beneath an arbor of wild plum blossoms the children had woven together. No preacher, no papers. Just vows spoken in the quiet of morning, surrounded by the land that had shaped them. Tobias stood beside Heath, proud and still. Tessa tucked lilac petals into Olive's braid. Afterward, they planted a pear tree near the fence line, beside the one Heath had planted the year his wife passed. Olive pressed her hands into the earth and looked up at him. "This one's for what's to come," she said. Years passed, but the rhythm stayed. The orchard grew. Tessa learned to ride bareback. Tobias built a forge with Heath and took to smithing with quiet focus. Olive kept the ledgers, ran the house, stitched blankets for the neighbors' babies. She grew herbs behind the kitchen window for the sick, and the women of Bluebank began to seek her out. Each evening, when the light slanted low and the air turned sweet with clover, Heath would find her on the porch. He'd take her hand without a word, and they'd sit together, watching the land they'd come to belong to. They did not speak of what they had lost. They lived in what they had found. And it was enough. It was everything.